welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video we are discussing on most commonly asked React.js interview questions which were asked in Cognizant React.js interview. So all of the question and answers which we will be discussing in this video are purely based upon real interview experience which is shared by candidate. So let's begin. Our first question is, what is useref and how do you bind it to an HTML input? One important thing which you can remember is in any keyword in React.js, if you see that that keyword starts with use word, then most probably it is a hook. So if you see any hook like use state, use effect, or any other hook, they always start with use. Okay, so useref also it is one of the hooks which is given to us by React.js, and it helps us directly access or control the DOM element in React. Okay, and we will see the example how we are able to access or control the DOM element directly in React. Also, one important thing is if you're making use of useref for any component, then that component becomes uncontrolled component. Example, how do you make use of, how do you bind it? So for any element, for example, you have one div element or h1 or any element, input element, so there will be some property called as ref for every element. In ref, if you just go and define it with input ref, so this input ref is basically defined using use ref at the beginning of your code. So if you are assigning that value to the ref property, then you are binding that input or binding that element to ref. Let's see example, code example. So you can see how do we make use of useref is, first we have to import the useref from React. So this is an important part, else you will get error. Then we have this return, where we return function where we are going to return the element which we want to show. So here we have one input box and then we have one button. Okay, and in input box here it is optional, this attribute is optional. If you want to give, you can give, else there is no problem. And in ref you can see that we are writing something called as input ref. So in input ref, what is this input ref? Input ref is basically a variable which is defined using the use ref. And where is this use ref coming from? Use ref is coming from the React. Okay, use ref is a hook and we are initializing it with null, and we have given that value to here in this ref to this input. Then whenever you click on this button, there is a button that focus input. Whenever you click on this button, you are calling one function called as handle focus. What is handle focus? So in handle focus you have this function here which is a fat arrow function, and here what are you doing? Here you are doing input ref dot current. What is current? What is current pointing to? Current is pointing to our element. So you are writing input ref dot current dot focus, which means that you are going to focus on this input box. So suppose you are having one input box here and then there is one button here. So whenever you click on this button, what will happen? Your cursor will go into this input box. That is how you are focusing your input. Apart from focusing, you can also style the element. So there is also like input ref dot current dot style background color or border. All these things you can do with by using input ref. So this is how we make use of use ref hook which is given to us in React.js, and this is how we can bind it to HTML input. So this is our normal HTML element, right? Input element. So this is how we can bind. So for binding, we have to make use of ref property, and where we have to assign our input ref constant variable, which we have defined, declared using use ref hook. Now let's see our second question. Our second question is, if you have seen Amazon's website, there you have a login button. Once you have logged in, then that button turns into hi your username after you have logged in. So how would you do that? How are you going to achieve that in React in this specific application in which you will be working in future? You are giving interview for some project, so if we want to do such functionality again, how are you going to achieve this? So basically they are asking you for a code example, and they will ask you to share your screen and write a basic code snippet. Even if it's not working, that is fine, but they want to check your logic. In this case, what you can do is you will be having one state called user and set state. You are defining it with by using use state hook and initialized it to null. So in return, this is where your button or your like this pan or paragraph, that hi username, that message will be shown. So you are just checking that if user is having any value, then you will show that hi Shruti. Okay, if it is not there, because initially it is null, right? You have not logged in. When you have not logged in, the user value is null. So if it is null, you will be shown with a button, and that button will be displaying something like login. When you click on this, so on click of this button, what are you doing? You're passing one callback function, arrow function, and you are setting the username to Shruti here. So this you can achieve it by API call also. So once you have logged in, API is giving you correct response and it is giving you the details of customer or the client, then you can get that data and you can display that name here. But since it is just a basic question, so you need not implement API here. Here we have directly written that username. Once you click on the button, username will become Shruti. So as soon as your username becomes Shruti, so set state, in use state, whenever you're doing any change, your component re-renders. So whenever your component re-renders, you will see here that okay, user is not null now, it is having some value, it is having Shruti as the value. Then it will go and check, this is our ternary condition, right? So if user is true, it is having some value, it is a truthy value, then it is going to display as the paragraph tag with hi Shruti, and it is not going to execute our second part of our ternary condition. So in ternary condition, how ternary condition works, that if the first part is true, then we are going to execute this first part after the question mark, else this false condition will be returned. So here once Shruti's user is having some value, then you will be showing that p tag. If it is not having value, it is just null, you have not logged in yet, then you will be shown with a button. Now let's see our third question. Our third question is, what were the new features that were added in ES6? This is most commonly asked interview questions, not only in this specific company but in almost every company. This question is a must question which is asked. So you can say that let and const, they were introduced in ES6. So before let and const, we used to declare our variable using a keyword called var. So this is how we used to make you declare our variable. Then after ES6, we got our let and const, and nowadays this is most preferred way of declaring our variable. Then we were introduced with arrow functions, and then we got template literals, destructuring, classes, modules like import and export. Nowadays our whole React is based upon import and export. That is how we are able to make multiple components and make reusable components so that we can use them across our application. And promises were also introduced to come back to solve the issue which we were facing in callback hell. So that is why promises were introduced in ES6. Let us see an example. See, this is a this one line is having example of 2 3 features that were introduced in ES6. So first thing which you can see is, this is a arrow function, this is a fat arrow function. So this is how you declare of arrow function, this is called as fat arrow. So arrow function example we have seen, this below whatever line of code you see the function, this is arrow function. Then you see that whatever variable is declared, whatever value we are getting, it is stored in some variable called greet, and it is declared using const, which means that your variable, once it is assigned some value, it cannot be changed. So we have seen let and const. So let is also similar, but with let you can change the value, with const you cannot change the value. Then we also see template literal. So what is template literal? So whatever you see this symbol, this is called as template literal. So you can write your string, and whenever you want to insert any variable, then you have to make use of dollar symbol and then curly braces. Inside this you can write your variable, and this variable will get replaced afterwards. So you will have an entire string hello and then name whatever you're passing, Shruti or anything. So this is our template literal. And there is also called as destructuring. Destructuring is nothing but, see here, name. If name doesn't come, it will become hello, or maybe it can become hello undefined. So mostly it would be hello only if you're not passing any name. So destructuring is nothing but, if you are not getting any argument by default, then you can give your name as maybe like uh, hello everyone. Okay, you can give one string here like hello everyone. So if you are passing a variable name, if you're passing this argument, whenever you're calling this greet, like how do you call greet? You write greet and you pass Shruti. So in case you're passing Shruti, then hello Shruti will be displayed. In case you're not passing, then this name will become hello everyone. This is our destructuring. Then we have classes and import exports. We all know that this is how we write our component. Whenever you're writing any component in React, you have to export it and import, and all we do whenever we want to import anything from React or from other libraries. That is how we import. And then promises were also introduced. Let's see our fourth question. What is difference between var, let and const? So let and const, they were introduced in ES6. We have discussed in previous question also. Let us see difference between them. So var, we will see var and let const one by one. First we will see scope wise. So scope wise, if you see, var it has function scope, functional scope, and let and const they have block scope. Let and const they have block scope. Okay, so var is having functional scope, whereas let and const they have block scope. Then coming to reassignment, in var you can reassign the value, with let you can reassign the value, but with const you cannot reassign any value. So once you have initialized your variable with some value, const is going to have that value for like all the time, it cannot be changed. Then we have hoisting. What is hoisting? Hoisting is nothing but moving the function declaration or the variable declaration to top of their scope. With var, yes, hoisting is done and the variable is assigned with the value undefined. Let and const, yes, they are also hoisted, but they are in temporal dead zone. That is why they are not assigned any value like undefined or anything. You get reference error whenever you're trying to access the variable before they are declared. So this is called as hoisting. Examples you can see that how we declare our variable. So let x is equal to 10, let y is equal to 20, and similarly for var also. Var was the one which we used to use previous to ES6. So let and const they were introduced in ES6. So from there after we are making use of let and const, and which is most acceptable and popular way of declaring any variable. So this is how we declare our variable with let and const and with var too. Now let's see our fifth question, that is what are two ways to create component in React. Two ways to create component in React. First is functional and second is class based components. So class based components are outdated and they were old. So nowadays we don't make use of class based component because they are very complicated and difficult to learn, difficult to understand. So we don't make use of class based component, we make use of functional component. They are simpler, also they are newer, they have hooks. With class component we have to make use of lifecycle methods, whereas with functional component we have hooks which are easier to understand, and they also have advanced features. How do we define, like how, what is the syntax of functional component? So with functional component it is similar to how you declare your function. You have to write function keyword, else you can also make use of arrow functions. So here we have normal functional component where we have written function keyword, then we have functional component name, and then we are returning a element. So in this return we can always return only one element, it cannot have multiple element. In case you want to pass multiple element, you will have to put it in a container, you will have to encapsulate it in one element and then you can return it. So here we just have h1. Suppose you want to show 5 headings, then what you have to do, you have to put all your headings into one container, maybe div or some body or content section aside. So one value, one element should be there, that is what you can return. Inside that there can be multiple elements. So here this is how you return, this is our functional component. And let's see our class components. So see the difference between lines of code and how complicated class based components look when compared to functional components. So in first line, in one line we were able to write functional component and it is easier to understand, easier to read, whereas in second we have our class based component, it is doing the exact same thing like the first one, but it is taking more number of lines and it is a bit complicated. So let's see, for class based component we have to write our keyword class, and then we have to write our component name, and it is going to extend react dot component. So this is a mandatory part which we have to write, that all your component they are going to extend the react dot component. Then we have braces, curly brackets, and then we have to write render here. First we have to write render, that what are you going to render in your screen, and after writing render you have to again write your return. and then you can pass your element. So this is how we write our class based component. So let's see our sixth question now. What is difference between class and functional component? We have seen in the previous slide, difference between class and functional component is functional are simpler and they make use of hooks, whereas class, they are complicated and they make use of life cycle methods. And functional component, they are modern and they are most preferred way of writing our components. Our seventh question is, what are life cycle methods in class based component? So what are different life cycle methods in class based component? We have first component did mount, which runs after render, after your component has rendered. Then we have component did update, which renders after your component has updated. And then we have component will unmount, which is going to run before your component unmounts. So there are multiple life cycle methods, but these are most important life cycle methods used in class based components. So we have one example here that whenever your component is mounting, you are just writing console.log that yes, my component has mounted. So this, whenever your component mounts or renders, then you will see that this message, this is logged multiple times in your console. Our eighth question is, how do we know when a React component updates? So how do we know? Like in previous slide also we have seen that whenever your component is mounting, you write this. So if you want to see update, which lifecycle method will you use? You will use this method, that component did update. So after using this, you will be able to see that if your component has updated. So let's see, we have to make use of component did mount in class components, or we have to make use of the dependencies in use effect which are available to us in functional component. So in class component, you have to do the same syntax here. Instead of did mount, you have to write update here. Okay, so by writing update, you do console that okay, my data has updated, so you will get this data, okay, your component is getting updated. But with functional component, how do you use? In functional component, we don't have life cycle methods, as we have already discussed, right? That in functional component we have hooks, we don't have life cycle methods. So use effect is the hook which was introduced in functional component to replace the life cycle methods. So in use effect, we have what is the syntax of use effect? You have to write keywords in use effect, and then you have to pass one callback function. So here we have arrow function. You can also pass a regular function here, but this is most common way of writing our use effect. Then we have something called as dependency array. So if you just leave your dependency array blank, then this use effect will run for first time only once whenever your component is loading. And if you have some variable here, this means that this use effect will run again and again whenever this count changes. So this is how use effect works. So in case you want to see if your React component is updating, suppose you have something called as count and there is a button. So whenever you click on this button, your count will increase one by one. So 1, 2, 3. So you want to see whether this component is getting updated or not. So whenever you click on this button multiple times, so your count should increase. So what you can do now, your count is increasing one by one, your state is increasing. So this use effect will run, and it is going to, you are just consoling that okay, this component is updated. This is how you can check that component is updated or not in functional component. With class based component, you have to make use of lifecycle method, which is component did update. Now our ninth question is, have you used routing in React, and how do you create routes? So for this question, if you are a fresher or you are an experienced candidate, if you're an experienced candidate, then obviously you would have worked on routing, because most of our real world application, we cannot do it in one screen only. We would be having multiple routes. But if you're a fresher, then you should make projects using routing so that you understand what this concept is. So let's see by example what is routing and how do you create routes. So to create routing, firstly, it is not routing is not available to us by default in React. You will have to make use of React router DOM library. So this is again a third party library. From there you have to import the browser router, you have to import routes, and you have to import route. This is routes and this is route. So these three important keywords you have to import from React router DOM. And then you have to start like browser router. So you have to start and then you have to end. Within it you will have multiple route, okay, and then you have to start that routes, okay, that your routes start from here and your routes are ending here. Inside this you are going to have multiple routes like 1, 2, 3. There might be multiple routes, how many screens you are having. So if you want to give a default page, default route, then you can just write path is equal to slash, which means that you are just you have just opened the application, then it is going to show you the home screen. Okay, it is going to show you the welcome screen. In case there is some specific in home screen, you might have login button, you might have sign up button, or you might have information button. So whatever you click, like if you're clicking on login button, from there you have to navigate your path to login/login. And then from there you can see that okay, if your path has become path in the URL has become login, then you are going to redirect your user to login component. Okay, and this login component will again be a different component with different screens. So this is how you can make your routes in your application. Our 10th question is, how do you create a link that navigates to another page? So you have to make use of link component from the React router DOM. So here you can see that we have made browser router, routes, and route from React router DOM. Now again from React router DOM we have to get the link component, and using that link component you can redirect, you can navigate your user to another page. Our 11th question is, how do you restrict the user from accessing the routes unless he or she has logged in? So unless that user is not a valid user, you cannot give them access to your application, right? So how will you protect them? How will you protect your access? So we can make use of protected route that checks login before allowing access. So this is our route, and normally you can just write element that navigate to login, but that is not the case. You have to give path that slash account if you're trying to access something called as account. If you have logged in into your banking and you're not a valid user and you're just going to account section, account screen, and you're trying to do some payment, that is not valid, right? That is why in case you're trying to access the account screen, you will first check whether that user is valid or not. So how will you get this user? From API you might get whenever you're logging, API might give you the data. Okay, this user is valid and this is the name. You can store it somewhere in global state or in your container, and from there you can check again and again that if user is valid, then you will show account, else you are going to navigate them back to the login screen. So this is how you can restrict the unaccessed user from accessing the important screens of accounts. Let's see the 12th question now. 12th question is, what package do you use for routing in React? So yeah, what package did we use in the previous previous questions? We made use of React Router DOM. So you can say the same answer, that you have made use of React Router DOM for routing in React. Our 13th question is, what are higher order components, and give an example. So they might ask you to share your screen and write a code snippet for what are higher order components. So what is higher order component? Higher order component, it is a function or it is a component. So our components are also functions, right? So it is a function that takes a component and returns the new one. So it is going to take one component, it is going to do some changes to your component, or it is going to have some wrapper around it, and it is going to return that wrapper element. So that wrapper component will in turn have your original component. So it, whatever component it is taking, it is going to do some kind of changes to it, and it is going to return the new component now. Okay, let's see a code example of what is HOC and how you can show. So whatever this code you see, whatever this block of code you see, it is basically a higher order component. Okay, this is how you have to write your higher order component. Now let us see how it works. We have higher order component called with loading. So where are we using with loading? So this is our with loading. This is how we are using with loading. So in with loading, what are we passing? We are passing user list. What is user list? User list is a component. So let's try to understand it clearly. What is happening is, we have one HOC, one higher order component called with loading, and we are trying to use it. We are trying to use the with loading that for whatever is my component user list. User list, what is this component? This component is just taking the users list and it is going to show you in UI one by one in list format. Okay, but I want to achieve a functionality that if user details are not there, okay, it is still loading. If user details are not there yet, then I want to show a loader. What is loader? You might have seen loader in multiple websites where data is not there, it is trying to fetch, then they show a loader, or they also show shimmer effect. So currently we want to show a loader, or we want to show something like, okay, it's loading, please wait. So I want to achieve that for this user component. I have written my logic, but I just want to show a loader here. So for that I have made a higher order component called with loading. So in this with loading higher order component, I am passing my user list like, okay, everything is done, just make sure that if data is not there, show me loading, else show whatever logic I have written. Okay, so you are passing your user list, so it goes to this part. Okay, now it is going to check this part, that is with loading. So in with loading you got one component. What is that component here? It is user list. So you got your user list, and then you are just returning a function. Okay, you are just returning a function. So this function called wrapper function you have returned. So in this user list with loading, what do you have here? You are having a function called wrapped component, because this is what you return, right? This is what you return. You returned a function. So whatever is the value here, you just accepted it from here. Whatever user list you passed component, you just accepted it. There is no line of code. It is just second line, like the first line inside the function. It is just returning a function. So this user list with loading is going to have a function. Which function? It is going to have wrapped component function. Now let's see what is happening. This is our app component, and here we have list of users, and then we are using user list with loading. What is user list with loading? It is a function. It is a functional component, in which, see here, what is wrapped component expecting? It is expecting props, like it is expecting something called as is loading, and it is expecting whatever is the secondary part, like dot 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 props. This is our rest operator, right? I have covered this topic of rest and uh, the spread operator in other previous videos also, so you can check that out to understand what is rest and what is spread operator. So here whatever is the data, we are expecting it in the props, and this will be our array. Like once you are making use of rest operator, whatever is coming, that will get changed to your array. So props will become your array. Anyway, now here we are passing that is loading. Also we are passing our data. Okay, we are passing our data, that okay, what is whatever you are receiving. So you can see there that is loading is going as false, and users is going as whatever is our users. Okay, this is what we are passing. So you're just checking that is loading, is it still loading? If it is still loading, it is true, then you will show a loader. You will show some p tag. Okay, it's still loading, please wait. And if it's not loading, you will show your component. Okay, so here below we are passing is loading as false, so you will see your data. What data? You will see this users list. This is what will be shown. So this is called as higher order component. So higher order component, in previous definition we read previous screen, that they accept a component, also they return a component. So did we return a component here? Yes, we returned a component, and then again we have made use of that component to show our data. Now one question is, why are we making use of props here? Like, can't we have written here users directly? You could have written that, but the thing is, HOCs, they are mostly written so that we can reuse it. Now here we have only user list. Maybe I also have order list. In order list, I might not be passing only user. I might be passing some extra details on what and all user, which supplier, and what is happening there. I might have delivery component also, like user list. I might have order, I might have delivery, I might have feedback. So there might be so many things, right? I don't know how many props I will be passing from those components. So because of that, we have made use of the rest operator here, that how many ever, whatever number of props are coming, we are getting it in props, and then we are checking that, okay, if it is loading, we will it is loading, is loading is true, then we will show a loader. If not, we will show whatever was the original component. If it is user list, we will replace it with user list. If it was order list, we will replace it with order list. So whatever is the list, we will replace it here, and whatever is the props which we pass, that is user. What is props here? It is user, right? So that users we will pass. In case it was something else, in case it was orders, in case it was delivery, with delivery there were dates, with delivery there were suppliers, there were locations. So whatever are the props, we are getting those props. Then again we are making use of spread operator here. So you have spread everything, whatever you got in array, you are again spreading it, and you are passing it in object. And then again you can see this component now got replaced by user list, right? So this user list with loading is what you were passing. So user list was your component, so user list, now this component is replaced with user list, and then you are passing whatever the props was, right? So you can see how it has cycle. What cycle we have seen? User list went till here, and then again from component you are showing this component. Let me clear everything and show you. Yeah, just to summarize what happened, we passed user list from here. What is user list? This is our normal component. We passed it where? So we passed it here. So whatever component you are seeing is this user list. And then what you are doing, you are replacing this component, right? So this component is again pointing to user list. And what props are we passing? We got props from here. we got props from our wrapped component, right? This is where we passed, so user got passed in this props, then again props got replaced here, we have made use of spread operator, now again this props are passed here. So this is how your higher order component works. You can make use of this with loading, with anything, not only with user, with the order, with the delivery, with customer, or any other component. You can make use of this component, higher order component called with loading. Okay, now let's see our 14th question, which is what are React fragments and can JSX have multiple divs in return? So let's answer this question first, that can we have multiple divs in return? No, we cannot have multiple divs in return. We can have only one element. We can only return one element from our return. And in case you want to pass multiple element, you want to show multiple element in your UI, what will you do? You are going to wrap it in a container. That container can be div, it can be section, it can be content or body or anything like that. It can be any other container too. So you have to wrap everything in one container, and that one single container you will pass from your return. Okay, so can we pass multiple divs? No, we cannot pass. So what happens in case you're not, normally what happens, see, if I want to show h1 also, I want to show p also, so what I have to do, I have to wrap it in div container. Okay, this is how we can wrap, and then here you have to close that div. So this is how you can wrap, and then you can return. If you don't do this, you will get error. So this we have done, this is how we pass. But you can observe one thing, what happens here is you have added one extra element here, you have added one extra node. So whenever your DOM is created, right, your DOM will have first one div, and inside div you will have title and you will have content tag. I mean like h1 heading and p tag. So this is how your DOM would look. You should never make your DOM have some irrelevant and unnecessary node in your DOM, because it would make your DOM more heavy. Your DOM should always be lightweight. Okay, because in case your DOM is heavy, then it is going to add latency to your application and it would not be user friendly, it would have performance issues. So you should always make sure of that your DOM is lightweight. That is why we make use of React, right? One of the advantage of React is it is lightweight, it makes use of virtual DOM. So there is no point in adding multiple nodes which are unnecessary. There is no point of div, like is it displaying anything to user? No, it is not displaying. What are we displaying? We are displaying heading and we are displaying paragraph tag. This div is of no use, it's unnecessary. Now similarly, if you are having some 15-30 components, and in every component you just go and add one extra node everywhere, it has added like 30 to 40 extra node in your DOM, which is unnecessary and is not useful for your user. So that is why we should not use the div. That is how we got introduced to React fragments. So fragments were introduced in React. What are fragments? Fragments let you group the element without adding extra DOM nodes. So that is why what we discussed, right? If we are writing DOM, we are like putting a container on multiple elements so that we can have one container. So that is what is called as adding extra DOM nodes. So instead of writing DOM, we can make use of fragment to group the elements. And JSX cannot, this is for the second question, that JSX cannot return multiple root divs. We have to wrap them in a fragment. Now either we can do div, that is a bad practice, else we can make use of fragment. So fragment, this is the syntax of fragment. So if you're making use of fragment, how your DOM looks, even though you see that there is something called as fragment here, what happens in real DOM, you will not have any extra node. Okay, that is the advantage of fragment, that here for returning value, because you will get error if you return two elements, you will get error for sure. So that is why we have made use of fragment. But in your DOM you will not have any extra node, so which makes your DOM lightweight. Either you can make use of this syntax, that is uh, lesser than symbol, greater than symbol, and then you can close it. Else you can write completely, like inside this symbols you can write complete fragment. Okay, this is also the syntax. So this is basically a bigger syntax where you have to write everything fragment. Else you can just drop the keyword fragment and you can just give the symbols. This will also work. Now let's get into our next question, which is how have you used Redux and what is Redux? So Redux is a state management library that allows for the consistent state sharing across components. So let's see what Redux, how Redux works. So in Redux, what happens is, suppose you are having a application. And this application is a calculator application in which we might be having multiple buttons like addition, subtraction, and then multiplication, division, and multiple things. So what you have to do, you have to store the data, whatever is your answer, right? Whatever is your count, that data you have to store, so that you can use it from any application. You need not pass prop by prop to every component that okay, this is my data. So you have to store it in some global container. That is what it is called as. So Redux, it is a state management library that allows for consistent state sharing across component. We can consistently share the state, share the data across components of our application. So this a we have to store, okay, that what is the answer. Now in case you want to like store that okay, with 0 you can add +1, you can do +1. So what you have to do, you have to call dispatcher action. So in Redux we make use of two hooks. That first one is use action, and one more is use selector. So we will see how it works. So you have to dispatch a action that okay, plus is clicked, okay, you will pass a action. Now in case it was subtraction, then it will have another action that okay, minus is clicked. Similarly, there might be multiple action, that what is the intention of that click, why is it being done. So once you have dispatched the action, it is going to reducer, it will go to our reducer. Okay, what is reducer? One second. What is reducer? Reducer is basically which is going to handle your data, which is going to store the data. So store, eventually store is the global container which will have the data, but it is through Redux. It is through the reducer. Okay, so this is our action and this is our reducer. So in reducer we will have a function. Reducer is a function anyway, and it is going to expect the data. It is going to take the data, existing data from store, or it can also have the newer data if it is the first time. And it will also check that did I get action for plus, was it for plus, was it for minus, was it for multiplication. And this is a simple example, but in case it is API call, so in API calls also the API call is going to give you the multiple data. It might give you so much of data which is not required in this place, or you don't want to store it, or you want to store it in a like different way, like the different structure. So that and all is done in reducers, that how you will be saving it. So all these logics and how you'll be storing and all structuring and all is done in our reducer. So once it is done in reducer, your data will be stored in something called as store. So this store is your global state container. From this state, from this store you can get the value. So when you're dispatching, right, when you're dispatching action, you make use of use dispatch hook. Okay, use dispatch hook. Okay, excuse me for my bad handwriting, but we make use of the use dispatch hook. And in case apart from that calculator, you have one history screen where you have to show what was the answer. Okay, and there might be multiple, this is history and there is one more, multiple screens are there. Then what will you do? Instead of passing all your data props by props that this was the data, what these component can do, this component can go and subscribe to this store. They are going to subscribe to the store, and whenever there is data change and your new component is there in DOM, and it is what is rendered currently, it is going to get the latest data. There is no lag in the data flow. So here they have to make use of use selector hook. So whenever they are like subscribing to the store, they have to make use of use selector hook, and from there they can get the data, latest data of what is the answer, whether answer was plus, or what have we done, the entire calculation, have we done plus or have we done minus. Like at last what is our answer, that is 5 or 6, anything. So whatever is the answer, this is how your Redux works. Now let's see our 16th question, that is how do you set up the Redux in your project. So how do you set up Redux in your project? You need to see, this is what we were discussing, that we have store to hold the state, then we have reducer to update the state, this is how we update the state, then we have action to describe the event, what kind of event it was, what was the intention behind that event, whether it was for increment, decrement, or add, or what kind of action was it. And then we have provider to connect the Redux to React. So how do you set up? So setup and all, actually you can see it in the Redux library also, they have their own website where they have written all these things, that how you have to set up the Redux. So we will see a small example how you have to do the setup. So you have to first import your configure store. Okay, you have to import configure store from Redux.js toolkit. So this is again a third party library. From there you have to import something called as configure store, and from there you have to take the configure store. From configure store you will have something called as reducers. Okay, and from reducers you are going to store the data. Hmm. Yeah, from reducer you are going to store the data. So why, what is this root reducer? Like in previous video, previous question, we saw that what is reducer, but what is root reducer? Like I'm hearing it for first time. So what root reducer means is, what happens is, when you have multiple API calls, you might have multiple screens, and you don't want to dump everything into one reducer. You don't want to put everything, like whole logic of your whole application, in one reducer. Then you can have multiple reducers. Okay, there will be one reducer for user related data, there will be one reducer for order related data, and then there will be one reducer for customer related data. So whenever you are going to these screens, or you're trying to do some functionality here, then you are going to call their specific APIs, right? Delivery, here we have delivery related data, so you will be having different APIs for different functionality. So when you get that data, you are going to store it in user, you are going to store it in order or the customer or delivery, right? But in store there is a uh, like rule that you can have only one reducer, like that root reducer is what you can pass. But in your application you cannot store everything in one place, it is going to make your code more complicated. That is why we split our reducers into multiple reducers. Okay, but when we want to set up our store, what we have to do, we will have one root reducer. And this root, like here we will have something called as root reducer, and this root reducer is going to combine all your individual reducers. This is how our root reducer works. So there will be a file, so all this setups and setup how we have to do is written in their website. So there will be one file for root reducer, one index.js file for the reducer purpose separately. So from there what you have to do, you have to like combine everything. So there is a syntax, separate syntax for that, how we have to combine. So you have to combine all the individual reducers, and all the individual reducers, what will happen, they will have their one place in root reducer, and that root reducer you are going to pass here. So whatever you're passing root reducer, it is going to have the combination of all the reducers which you have used in your application. This is how you can do it. And now once you have made use of configure store and you have your root reducer is where you do all the updation of these states, right? So once you have all the data, you are storing it in store, and then next time whenever they any component wants to use it, they can subscribe to the store. So this is how you set up your Redux store for your project. Now let's see our 17th question. Where do you use the reducer function? So we have discussed previously also that reducer functions, they define how state update happens. Okay, this is the example we have discussed before, that reducers, they are function and they expect the state. If it is not there, it is not there in your store, then it might take the default value. See, this is what is called as destructuring, which we saw, like one of the feature of ESX. So if it is not there, it is going to take state value as 0, and if it's there, then it is going to take that value itself, like whatever is the latest value. Then it is also going to accept something called as action, or action in argument, and it is going to check that whether action dot type is it increment. If it is increment, it is going to do state plus 1. So if nothing is there, 0 plus 1 will become 1. Second time when you do the same thing, you are clicking on the plus button, what happens, state would be 1 till now. In your store, state is stored as 1, right? So 1 state is having one value, so 1 plus 1, what does it become? 1 plus 1 becomes 2, right? So this is how you can store. Now again this 2 will be stored in your store. So from reducer, whatever changes are happening, whatever changes you are doing to your store, to your data, it is going to get stored in your global container called as store. From store again you can get the latest data. So there is no changes, there is no lag in the flow of data. So whatever is the latest data, that is what you get from your global container called store. And then you can return that state. So you're returning the state, and where will it be saved? Your state, like the actual data, it will be saved in your store. So this is how you use the reducer function. Now let's see our next question, that is how do you make changes to reducer state. So how do you make changes to reducer state? If you want to do any changes in reducer state, or in your store you want to store the data, how do you do it? You do it by using dispatch. You have to make use of the use dispatch hook. Here we have discussed previously, so this is one of the simplest example that how you do dispatch. You just dispatch, like you might have some on click function. Okay, so when you're clicking on that button, you will have some on click function, and in on click function you can dispatch the action, and in that you can just write a object. In object you are giving type is increment. In case it was some minus button, then you will have one more function, that on this one, on subtraction click, this is on subtraction click, and this is on addition click. On addition click, what you're doing, you're passing type as increment. In subtraction click, again you will have one function, and in that function what will you do, you will write the same thing. You will write the same thing, instead of increment you will write that okay, this is decrement. So this is how you dispatch your action. This is simplest way, but this is not how we do in real world projects. What we do is we have one function called increment, and these are also called as action creators. So for these function, there will be multiple function when you are working with the real world project. So they are stored again in a separate file of index.js for the action purpose separately. So there might be multiple functions like increment, decrement, get user data, get customer data, get order data. So there might be multiple functions for actions. How do you do it? Is just a normal function, arrow function, and in which you are passing type increment. So how do you do it? Like on you, in the same on click, on addition click, in this function you will dispatch something called as increment. Okay, so what is increment? This is a function. What is this function pointing to? This function is pointing to the above function. And what is this function? Again it is arrow function, and from here you are passing your type increment. This we write our code this way to avoid any bugs or for easier debugging. So for that purpose, this is like the good practice we follow. Okay, so this is how you have to dispatch your action to make any changes to the reducer. So if you found this video to be helpful, then do give a like to this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you have any feedback or comment, then let me know in the comment section. Also, if you want me to make video on any topic, then you can let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching everyone.